Welcome to the Dairy News and Views podcast, a production of the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Dairy Team. Our podcast covers current educational, research, and industry tools available for your operation to manage healthy cows and calves while producing the highest quality dairy products. Well, thanks for joining us today on Dairy News and Views from the ISU Dairy Team. I'm Jen Bentley, Northeast Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, and I'm here with my colleagues Fred Hall, Northwest Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, and Gail Carpenter, Assistant Professor and State Dairy Extension Specialist, as we recap a recent field day held at the ISU Dairy Research and Teaching Farm, focused on managing the employee side of forage feeding. So welcome back to the podcast, Gail and Fred.
Always happy to be here, Jen.
Absolutely. And, we've got a really good topic today, having a program that is good for everybody, but having it right there at Iowa State Dairy, giving folks a chance to see what we have down there. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I really like getting to use that classroom and getting to show people around the farm and show it off a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure it draws a lot of discussion points outside of just the topic that you're focused on. And it sounds like you guys had a great discussion, some great presenters. And I think we're just going to recap here before we go into the audio session of that. And so why don't you tell us about the discussion that took place? Field day event was called Building Your Best Feed Team. So who were your presenters and what were some of those highlights?
Well, what we really wanted to focus on for this field day was, like you said, building your best feed team. It is a little bit of a football pun because we had the tailgate the following day. So the sports puns kind of kept coming once they started. But what we were really wanting to focus on was that team communication. Something that came up a lot during our webinar series that we hosted earlier this year around silage harvest was that really what makes or breaks a feed program is going to be that communication and that team, right? Like between the nutritionist and the veterinarian and the producer and the herds person and the feeders. And there's just so many moving parts when it comes to feed programs on dairy farms, and we really wanted to make sure what we really wanted to focus on was that aspect of communication and building that team environment. So I don't know, I think we accomplished that. What do you think, Fred?
Oh, absolutely. I really enjoyed Victor as he started talking about all of our teams don't look like they did 30 years ago. And as we experience different cultures and different languages, different backgrounds and experiences, he really made some great points on how we keep that team building and making it stronger because of the diversity.
And I guess I'll back up a little bit because we didn't say who was the speakers or who the speakers were. So Victor was our second speaker, Dr. Victor Gomez-Leon. He's from Kansas State University, and he is one of the state dairy extension specialists down at Kansas State. So he brings in, he's a repro physiologist. So he was a little surprised, I think, when I called him and asked him if he wanted to be on a nutrition panel. But he is multilingual himself. He's a native of Colombia and studied in Brazil. Now he's here in the U.S., so he speaks English, Portuguese, and Spanish. And a lot of his extension programming is around working with, doing trainings for farm employees who don't speak English as their first language. So really appreciated his perspective on that. Our other two speakers were Dr. Andre Periera from Periera Animal Nutrition. He kind of brought in that nutritionist in that industry perspective. And he talked a lot about the relationship between the nutritionist and the producer, and the nutritionist, the producer, and the veterinarian, and the agronomist and other support staff that work for dairy farms. And then our last speaker was Dr. Barry Bradford from Michigan State University. It was a treat to get Barry here. He is actually an Iowa State alumnus, so he graduated from here in 2002. He's an Iowa native, so it was nice to bring him back to Ames. But he spoke specifically about nutrition and feeding protocols and kind of getting those feed protocols nailed down and some of the monetary value that he sees there and some of the common things that they've been seeing in their extension programming in Michigan. Some, I guess, low-hanging fruit or commonalities, I guess, that you might say among farms when looking at their feed programs.
And he talked a little bit about a new program that they're putting together that I thought sounded really intriguing.
Yeah, so they're doing some feed auditing, their extension team is auditing feed programs or feed programs isn't the right word. When I say feed programs, I start thinking about feed softwares, right? But but talking about feeding management on dairy farms. So they come in and they'll spend a whole day kind of doing a checklist, looking at different priority areas. And there's, I don't remember what he said, 100 and something things that they look at. There's a ton of stuff that they look at. And then they kind of pull it into a few different categories. So they look at efficiency, shrink, safety, production, hygiene, and mixing. Those are the priority areas that they kind of break it down into. He said, here it is, 120 specific factors. So they spend a day there with their clipboards looking at 120 different things on dairy farms that all kind of tie together for feed efficiency, or for feeding efficiency. So that number to me just, that kind of speaks to just how complicated feeding can be and feed management can be on a dairy farm. There's so many things that go into making it work right. And if any of those things goes wrong, it can have big impacts.
I was intrigued that safety was included there. I mean, we all talk about it, but we've been on enough farms where you see broken poles, you see busted up doors, and that speaks to the potential somebody's going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that that's a big part of it, or a core part, kind of intrigued me.
Yeah, I appreciated that he highlighted that. That's something else that we've kind of talked about along the way as well. Making sure that you know where people are, make sure people have high-vis vests on, make sure people are aware of where equipment is moving, those mirrors that you can have coming around corners, all of those things tie together. And I think that also ties in with some of what Victor talked about too, making sure that employees know that they're valued. And a great way that you can let employees know that they're valued is by making sure that they're kept safe and that they're not coming into any bodily injury by working on your farm.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounded like you really gleaned some resources from those universities. How did you get those, from Michigan, Kansas State? How did we get those all together in the same room on a Friday afternoon?
Well, I did my PhD at Kansas State, so that was part of it. I talked Victor into doing it because he could come visit us on the way back from World Dairy Expo. So it gave him an excuse to drive up to Madison and come back. And his wife actually did her PhD here at Iowa State as well. So we have a lot of Iowa State connections out there. There's like how many, like 6 degrees of Iowa State separation or whatever that is. And then Barry was actually my PhD advisor as well when he was at Kansas State. So tried to pull a few personal strings there to get this group turned out. And it helps that Ames is such a fun place to visit, and it helps that we had a football game to bribe them with too.
I was just going to say, Farmageddon played a pretty good part in there, Milk Wars at Farmageddon. It was fun to have, we had a producer family from Kansas the next day at the tailgate. We had Iowa producers. So, yeah, it all just kind of melded together and made for a good program. And then in the evening, Dr. Stephanie Clark gave a cheese program. And I'm sure a lot of folks is the first time they may have tried some of those cheeses. Surprisingly, the one that kind of went empty the first was the sheep cheese.
Mm-hmm.
It was excellent, folks.
It was so good.
Yeah, if you get a chance, that's something you need to sample.
Yes. We put together some charcuterie boards, and Dr. Clark led us through the bacteria that do the different process. She got kind of into the science of it a little bit, but it was really fascinating to kind of hear some of that and tie it in with the palate of the cheese. And plus, I mean, there's never a bad reason to eat cheese, right?
Exactly. And the only thing we didn't have was to pair it with some wines. But,
Well,
we'll have to be off campus if we want to do that next time.
Next year we'll plan for some wine maybe.
There you go.
Well, it sounded like the tailgate didn't end quite so well for our Cyclone fans, right? But were your K-State fans happy that attended the meeting?
Yeah, it was a kind of an exciting game there. A little bit disappointing for those of us who were cheering for the Cyclones, but I said it was a win-win for me because I'm an alumni of K-State, and Iowa State pays my bills. So whoever won, I was happy. But yeah, it looked like a pretty exciting game there for a little bit.
So do you think this will make this an annual event or try to do a tailgate maybe next year to kind of continue this tradition?
One of our assistants we had from ISDA, Mitch and Cynthia were down there, and they were all smiles. And that question was posed, and I think we're going to see that partnership for at least another year. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, and we should really make sure to emphasize that we're so grateful for the sponsorship of the Iowa State Dairy Association for that. They really helped pull the whole thing together and helped us with promotion. And it was a great partnership to be able to work with the producer groups on this as well.
You know, that was my first tailgate. And I can say if you went away hungry from that, it was your own fault because we had
I don't think
great
it's your first
food.
tailgate, Fred.
Well, first one of that caliber.
Okay.
The
First
ones with the,
professional tailgate, maybe.
there you go. There you go. But no, we had great conversation. We had a lot of students who attended, academics, and I said producers from both Kansas and Iowa. So yeah, it was very enjoyable time.
I agree.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys facilitating that whole event Friday and Saturday. And we do have a portion of that, I guess, field day recorded. And so we're going to tune in to some of that discussion on building your best feed team. So again, those presenters were Dr. Andre Prayer from Periera Animal Nutrition, Dr. Victor Gomez-Leon from Kansas State University, and Dr. Barry Bradford from Michigan State University. So let's tune in, and we look forward to visiting with you on the next Dairy News and Views from ISU.
So thank you for that nice talk, and it's really interesting to see how folks are using cameras on farm, and obviously we're seeing a lot more of that. Have folks been developing apps or different kinds of software to make that easier? It's a really great idea to go through and do all that tracking of bump management, but obviously that's time consuming. We're talking about the shortages of time, so if there's a way to automate that, that would be an incredible thing. So I'm curious if you can comment on what's out there.
So the question is, cameras definitely have a lot of utility for tracking things that are going on in the feed bunk and other places in the pens. Is there anything going on to try to automate some of that so it's not so much time? Particularly these cameras, I mean, we go tie them up and then you got to pull the card out and shove it in a computer and watch a video, right? So that's a very real thing. Yes, so I know there's at least 3 companies working on using AI to sort of highlight things for you. I do know that one milk marketing group has now required, I think this is right, that every human-animal interaction is recorded and reviewed. So they've set up some system that the cameras basically only save pictures where there's a human and an animal, and then somebody watches like 16 of these at once, and it'll run through 24 hours of those on a big dairy in like an hour. Somebody still has to sit there for an hour and watch all these people go, you know. But it's just to make sure there's nobody beating an animal, and you just have to do that. So at least they've taken a massive task and made it manageable. On the feed analysis software or feed assessment stuff, I know Campus is one company that's been working on that, and I think they've made, I don't really know day to day how well it works on a real dairy. They've been, some dairies are paying for it, but I don't know personally how well it works. But I know there's a couple other companies wanting to get in that space, so I think we'll get there, but yeah.
So talking about like improving communication on the farm and, you know, WhatsApp and those kind of messaging apps like that, I was on a dairy this summer that had no reception at all. Like you had to go off farm to get any kind of reception. So what kind of, do you have any creative ideas for farms like that where you can't communicate through recent technology?
Get satellite internet.
I mean, Starlink, right?
We have it available, Starlink. Yeah, so
Set up Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and I will just add to that. Yeah, Wi-Fi. We have some farms that offer Wi-Fi, and it can turn also into a problem. So you have to be careful. So some producers may have limit on Wi-Fi use or time of use, things like that. That you want to make sure, you know, these are great technologies, but you don't want your feeder texting when he's feeding cows, or the guy is cleaning in the middle of the pen and he's texting. So we probably need also training for those things.
I mean, we did used to communicate before there was smartphones, right? I assume Fred was around back then. You remember?
Smoke signals, right?
You know, the whiteboard still, everybody walks by it and it's there. May not be as glitzy and romantic, but you know, I can still get my message across when I write it on the whiteboard.
I want to give you an example that ties these together. One of big farm that I support, I don't feed them, but I support them. They have two big red and green lights in front of each feed area. And if the light is red, you need to push up feed. They're on a timer. You go, press the button, red turns green, you push up the feed. So they're on a timer. That's easy, right? Those big lights, the owner is looking at them, so you're like, yeah, I gotta get it done.
So can all of you spoke on kind of different angles on the communication side, right? Of working with industry professionals, with working with farm employees, et cetera, and building a feed team. So do you have examples of farms that you've worked with that are doing communication really well? And what do you think sets those farms apart? Do you have real world examples of just something that like, this is like gold star?
This is not directly answering your question. I mean, I do know that some dairies are using like WhatsApp, just exactly like we're talking about. I probably don't have enough insight to know if they're using it super well, but I've seen people on farms, you ask them a question, they'll go look at a chat string, so that's a good sign. But this is kind of related, but there's a farm in Michigan that I'm trying to get some like HR assessment going at, because I don't know any other farm of his scale that does this, but he cross-trains everybody. So people do have a specialization, but then they do rotations in other parts of the farm pretty universally. And I'm really curious if that leads to better job satisfaction beyond just the resilience factor of somebody goes down, somebody else knows how to do that. So I'm not sure if that's an awesome idea or not, but I like the concept.
As I mentioned before, something I see is the expectations. You have to be very clear sometimes. I don't see many people creating a job advertising with expectations for these things, but when you interview these people, you have to start them right since the beginning. And you have to say what are the expectations, whether that's going to be on a rotational program, it's going to be just at a specific point, and providing feedback. So whether those are with a whiteboard that I love when I arrive to a farm and I see a whiteboard with information, because it may not be detailed information, but it provides a good feedback saying, hey, things are going well, keep up the good work. And definitely technology is changing how we see some of these things. Training may be also something that sets apart some of these farms.
So one of the best farms I work with, just giving you a practical example, every quarter they have training in Spanish, so it's a person that does the training, but the person is not doing the training. So the nutritionist, the veterinarian, sometimes the agronomist is there, rarely. At least the nutritionist and the veterinarian, we're sitting down and the trainer is literally just translating what we tell them, what we think should be done, right? And I feel like that communication works really well because it's two-way. They can actually ask us too and say, why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? And we can communicate. And the more you go and the more you show them you're a person like they are, the more they're going to be open. Everybody's going to be open to you, right?
I like that because sometimes as extensionists, I can go to a place, and I may be teaching something that you are as well, or I may be teaching something that is off to what you guys are trying to get. So I say owners and managers should be there, but that's a wonderful idea.
On the other end of the scale spectrum, I'll throw out this example. There's a farm in Michigan that every single month has like a cookout for everybody involved at the farm, and like the veterinarian, like extension people invited, the nutritionists, and most of them come because it's fun, and then they like cover one aspect of they're considering this change to management, and the employees are all there. So it's kind of extreme, but it's pretty neat. It makes for a nice culture on the farm.
Yeah, we have some farms that they do run. I think it's like I don't know how long they run, but they have some social activities besides. They probably don't have the training, but they have some social activities just to work on the communication side.
Victor, I want to go to your culture side of your presentation. You showed the Iowa State page with the work-life celebration. And do you see, as you communicate with people who manage the farm, that they don't always understand that culture? They assume everybody has that same experience, and yet all the things, like holidays, taking care of your home, understanding Iowa weather. That publication talks about, never mentions how to milk a cow, how to feed a cow, but it talks about, okay, winter's here, and here's how you change your thermostats in the house. And it goes to harvest centers, dairies, poultry centers. But that's a conversation should we have more of?
I think so, and I can relate to that on a program that the Ohio State has. It's a program where Gustavo gets together with employees. There's not a training topic to discuss. It's just what's your concern this week, what's going on in your life. And sometimes we may not be performing well because we are worried about winter is coming and we don't have a heater, or the roof of our house blew up, things like that. And again, I'm not trying to create a union here or to say we have to take care of every small detail, but we have to take care of our employees and show that we take care, we worry about them. And when we do that, there is obviously a return on the type of job they are doing. So we have some specific farms, they show the employees they care, they do these social events, if winter is coming, they will do something, health events. Some of these employees will never go to a doctor, they don't know. We have problems of visions that they just go undetected. So some programs will go take a look at how visions are, or even color blindness, or maybe what it's blue for me may be green for somebody else, things like that. And these people are checking on pH meters based on colors. So, there are such many small details that it will make the difference on these people's life and their work. So I do believe we have to have more of those conversations.
First of all, thanks everybody for coming and your presentations today. It was time well spent. When it comes to training and onboarding, you guys have is there any research or any input, I guess, on what training works best? Is it following a video that the farms put together? Is it following an SOP? Or is it job shadowing somebody, following their routine for a week or a couple days or something like that? Is there one type of onboarding or training that works?
So I'll start with that quickly. I'll tell you, I don't know if there is one that's better than the other. I know the one that actually happens all the time, which is between employees, and that one just happens. You can't fight it. And if there's an employee that doesn't do everything right, and that's the one teaching, that's the one I'm going to go talk to. And I'm going to spend my terrible Spanish with him, but I'm going to go and talk to him in Spanish and be like, we need to teach better from now on. Instead of making a 1-hour presentation to everybody, I'm just going to go talk to that guy. That's how I do it, because I just know the reality of most farms. So
I don't know research, I don't know if you know any, but what I see is people, sometimes they will go through a training, either it is 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever, and some of the things he's seeing may not be familiar for him. So he may need to go to the real world and come back to the training, and that's when things are going to start clicking. But the problem with some of these onboarding or the opportunity with some of these onboarding programs is that he gets trained one time. When is he gonna get trained again? And so that is just as a feeling, that yeah, he's mostly busy at that moment, but that's the time where he needs to be retrained so things start clicking for him.
I was just talking. I don't know why I'm having a blank spot in my brain on her name, but faculty member at University of Wisconsin is working on like a minimum just to cover your butt training for when you have a brand new employee. Does like don't beat animals training, right? But they usually try to get like how do you actually effectively move an animal? Because a lot of people now hired have zero animal experience, right? And it's very apparently quite ineffective, like just showing these videos and showing like the flight zones and everything, because if they've never even been around the animal, it's hard to get a sense of it. And then like you go up to this animal and you're kind of scared because you've never been around a 2,000-pound animal before, and this doesn't work. So she's actually working on like a simulator, like a flight simulator, but for moving animals, which I would think wouldn't be that hard to make compared to 747 flight simulator, but probably would be highly effective, right? Because you get more of a sense of what it's like. But I don't know that we'll be able to do that for everything on a farm, but things like that I think would help. But I don't know, personally just watching a video, it's like, I almost nothing left.
Yeah, I think most students in here probably have experience doing IACUP training.
Yeah, exactly.
How effective is that? Yeah.
Sorry.
But, and I know a lot of you asked about research. I know a lot of like pedagogy research when you talk about designing curriculum would say if you can give information to people in multiple different ways, that's going to be best because different people might learn differently. Like I might prefer visual versus reading something versus hearing something. But even if I have a preferred way of getting information, if I get information using multiple different senses, that's going to stick better.
So South Dakota State University is not specifically on onboarding training, but they had a program. It's a dairy toolbox or some kind of thing like that, and it's a 10-week program, and it's only 15-minute or 20-minute training, 15-minute training every week for 10 weeks. And so this is just based on the theory that after 15 minutes retention just starts decreasing. And so whenever she compared the result of that program versus the 40-minute training program, she saw better results.
Just to follow up with one thing on that topic, how many dairies do like cross-train or train-the-trainer kind of activities where they are trying to essentially have a chain or I don't know how to put it, not a Ponzi scheme, but you know what I mean, a pyramid of you train the next person, and they train the next person, and then to come back to your point, Andre, then when you go to the other employees, well, kind of tried to standardize the training across everybody. Maybe this is a naive question, but I'm curious if people try to take that sort of strategy and then come back to each other and compare notes, hey, are we treating the same way?
The herd managers, owners, they ask us to help them with that kind of stuff. Yeah, to do the trainer. I'll tell you, it's not easy to do that because there's a lot of, people move around in the industry, but we have to try to do that. We do have to try. I meet with a feeder every time I go to a farm. I meet with a feeder for sure. And if I have to speak Spanish with him, I'm going to go and speak Spanish and try to get my point across, or even ask, like, do you have any question? Do you understand why you're doing it? Do you have any question why you're doing this or that? And pretty much every week I go, they come up with a new question. Like, why do I mix for 5 minutes and not 3? Why do I put mineral first and not last? So there's always these little questions. These little questions are super important because they will train other people. They understand why they're doing it. But I'll tell you right now, it's not easy for that. I don't think it is.
So on the trainings I've done, which they are not I've done, but from my experience, the head of the group will be on that training. And you can see how this is a more curious, interested person. He knows about things. And you know, after the training, I will spend time with him, and he will come and say, well, yeah, the not what you presented is great, but that's not a problem. The problem is like the next week they are not gonna do these things. They know these things, and so I think where we struggle a little, and I'm trying to figure out what we can do on that is how to make these people to manage more efficiently, and you know because they know the procedure, but how can they communicate that efficiently? And sometimes in the Latin culture, if we are brothers, you know, he may not respect me that much, or he may not do what I'm asking to do, and we have to have those limits. So I'm trying to see what other industries do in terms of training managers on how to become managers.
I kind of think from a 20,000-foot view that the dairy industry is still just on the early edges of transitioning from like a one person runs or oversees everything to this tiered management model. I mean, there's a few, like I'd say Riverview's pretty far down that road, but even a lot of 10,000 count dairies are not very good at having middle managers that have any authority or training on how to lead people. So I think you're right. There's a huge need there.
Pertaining to like building that relationship with employees and then that chain of owners and managers, I've seen a lot of people actually build a good relationship with manager to employee, and then those herd managers have a really good relationship with the owner, and then basically communicates every problem, and then that owner kind of tries to kind of stay back or lay back, because the owners can tend to be a little bit intimidating, especially if you're working with people that don't have the same culture. And I've seen that usually it works very well. Do you think that actually emphasizing a better relationship, like owner to employee, would help those employees feel more comfortable, or actually like be more open to ask more questions to the owner if they were like interested in, as you said, like keeping that job for working in this industry?
I can take that. Okay, so this is yes, I think trying to build that is healthy, but I also try to work the other end. So when I'm with the employees, they say, well, you know, and this is hypothetically, they may say, we communicate with the manager, we don't see the owner. Or yeah, it is the same for me. I never see the president of K-State, and so one of the things that I try to make these people understand is, you know, things may operate a little bit different, especially if we move to larger operations. Those people are there so we can have that communication path, and we don't need to go to the owner or to the person that is on top, because there is things to facilitate that flow of communication. So I always tell them, the first person you need to reach if you have something to adjust, complain, opportunity, is the group, the leader of your group, or the manager of that group. And he's in charge of taking that communication to the top. And you know, social events, again, the owner will be there. It's a great opportunity for them to talk. It's nice when the owner just walks around and talk to people, say hi, how are you doing, things like that. But we cannot have fake expectations that every small detail is gonna be myself telling to the owner or the president of K-State, hey, I have this problem last week. So, you know, both ends need to work to middle term.
I'll give you a quick practical example. Hope this is funny. We get to this farm. We have to give a presentation to the colostrum, the calf team. Okay, cleanups, how to do cleanups, how to clean their colostrum, clean buckets, and make everything clean. It's all about cleaning. I get there and I don't dress like this. If you guys know me here at Iowa State, this is not how I go to a farm, right? I'm jeans, shirt, we're gonna get dirty. I get to this farm just like I usually dress up. Everybody else from my team has a nice shirt, all dressed up, all nice, and I just look at it and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a disaster. So they want to make that, get there, open the presentation, give the 40-minute presentation, and 2 weeks we'll come back and see if you fixed it, right? As soon as we get there, and I'm the translator, I'm the one that does the Spanish translating in that group at that day. As soon as we get there, I look at all of them and how they're dressed, and the owner's there, and the herdsman is there, and all the bosses are there. And I'm like, why don't you guys go walk cows and I can just chat with these guys here myself. You go walk cows. I chatted with them for an hour. In 1 hour, I figure out all the problems they're having. I talk to them person to person instead of a boss to employee. Person to person. Hey, how's your life? How do you like it here? You know, how do you like the cold? Yeah, cold weather is terrible. That's a good conversation breaker here in this region. So you go on those discussions, and at the end, this guy was telling me, oh, the temperature of this is not right. My water heater is broken. I can't fix the water heater. I'm taking notes. As soon as everybody comes back, they're like, okay, we're going to do the presentation. I'm like, no, we're done. Here's a list. Here's a list of stuff that's wrong that we have to work on together. And they were very appreciative. We came back a month later. The water heater was fixed. Everything was clean. You know, it was very different. The boss versus employee relationship versus you're a person just like me. Talk to me here. You know. So I think that was huge. In our culture, you have 2 Latin Americans here. In our culture, that's very important. I think it is very important to me to not have that, to not show like, oh, this person is very important, whatever.
Well, I think that's what Victor said too at the beginning of your talk. Like, don't treat people like kids. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
they're adults. Just like, I mean, we have college students in here and grad students. Like, you all like to be spoken to as adults, right? And I think just understanding the humanness of people is really important.
Yeah, and what is key there is that you spend some time talking to them as humans. So I can communicate with him, I can trust him, and he will help me. So that's key for that communication.
Victor, you talked a little bit after your presentation about mistakes and what happens when you make mistakes and kind of that line of communication. But I want to flip that question on to Andre, because I think he actually asked you that question. When you're working with the nutritionist that you train, mistakes happen, and nutrition consulting tends to be very competitive, right? And so how do you have that discussion with your trainees or with producers? Like, when things happen, maybe you do have take some blame. Maybe there's something going on that is the nutritionist's, within the nutritionist's purview. I know I work with nutritionists who tend to try to cover things up a little bit because they don't want to get fired. So what is the best way to kind of have those conversations, not just to the employees on the farm or employee back to herd manager, but what's from the farm out to consultants of that? I mean, I'm not saying that you ever make mistakes, right? But
I always make mistakes. I do it all the time. Well, I'll start with that. We all make mistakes, right? And nutrition is a very competitive field. It's usually the first person to get fired when something's going wrong. The nutritionist gets fired. That's the first person. I've seen too many of those to see that the farm doesn't change. You fire this nutritionist, and 8 months later, the other nutritionist gets fired, and a year later, the other nutritionist gets fired. And I know of one farm that doesn't have a nutritionist because he can't find one. He just fired everybody in his region. So, I mean, good luck being your own nutritionist, right? My take and what I teach to my team is always take responsibility, always take ownership of what's going on. Okay, is there a reproduction problem going on? Take the ownership and say, okay, there's a repro problem going on. Don't just say, whatever, it's not my problem. Say, there's a repro problem going on. I'm going to work with them. I'm going to ask them questions. I'm going to see if the problem is mine, first of all. And I'll say, this might be my problem. Let's fix this right now. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to dig into it, right? If you sweep things under the rug, you are doomed. You are absolutely done in that farm. So you got to take responsibility and take ownership of when the problem comes to you, and follow up. They're going to want an answer not in 2-3 weeks. They're gonna want an answer tomorrow or in 2 days. The follow-up is critical.
All right, let's. Oh,
I have one.
Yeah.
So
plot twist.
on the on the assessment, do you guys separate? How do you move forward after you do the entire assessment? Do you separate on? Okay, this is training. This is facilities. We have these opportunities, and then I'll switch a little bit to you. When you go to do some training and you go there and the guy says, well, yeah, the training is great, but we have this problem, this problem, this problem. How do you approach that? That it's not a milking a school problem, it's the bedding of the cow problem or the facility that the farm has. So.
Yeah, I think we try to break it up into immediate things that you can do that are not a huge time or money investment. One is that simple little check sheet for that one farm about middle of the night feed availability, right? So that's a simple change that we help them implement pretty quickly. And then saying, we see opportunities here. Maybe it's a new, maybe it's bringing in a hammer mill on the farm or something. That would be an outlay of tens of thousands of dollars, but maybe would pay off pretty quickly. That's kind of how we break it up. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and do you write back a report?
Oh, what we have been doing is going in and just having a meeting with them and giving them like a short written report, but mostly we talk through it with them. And I think right now we're just kind of firing up a 6 to 12 month follow up to see if did anything with it. So I don't really have much data yet on how impactful it's been. I do know one farmer, I talked to the nutritionist last week, and I'm like, tell me the truth, did anything happen? But we kind of knew that one probably wouldn't change anyway, but that's part of the reality. Yeah.
So on my part, just like I did in my presentation, I showed them the money. I put the money there, just like Barry did too on the shrink, right? If you have a 20% shrink on a farm and it's costing you $50,000 a month, let's say low $50,000 a month, right? How much does a concrete pad cost? That's on mud. $200 for a nice concrete pad that will cover that whole area. $200,000. That's 4 months. That's easy, and actually you can, if you show that money to the lender. Lenders will be like, why haven't we done that before? $200,000 to save that much money? Let's do it right now. So you show the money. How much money are they wasting on some anti-cell count because they're just not cleaning the pens correctly, right? Or how much money are you wasting on having a 150% overcrowding facility, and you're just spending a lot of money on feed and not getting the return on efficient milking, right, on that. So money talks very loud. I just show the money, and the owner is gonna, pull his hair about it. The herd manager is gonna say, I gotta do something about it, and I don't know how the employees are gonna feel about that, but I know that money will escalate somehow. And you have bonuses options and these types of things, right? Increase the precision of feeding, and you can get a bonus to being the most precise and etc. So that's hard though.
All right, well, let's thank our speakers.
This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or combination inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.